Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurtzbacher, and today we're going to hear some adventure stories that might cause you to second guess your own next adventure. Our guest is Wes Lawson, General Manager at Jesse Brown's Outdoors, where he specializes in adventure travel outfitting. Wes works alongside of Bill Barty, who was also a guest of this show, episode 16. Together, Bill and Wes co-host the Carolina Outdoors on WBT News Talk 1110. Wes and his wife, Amy, live in Charlotte, North Carolina with their son and 2 dogs. Prior to becoming general manager at Jesse Brown's, Wes served as the Associate Dean of Students at Hampden-Sydney College. He, along with David Klein, who was Dean of Students, expanded the college's student leadership programs and adventure travel footprint that he experienced himself as a student. During his time at Hampden-Sydney College, he led student trips along the Appalachian Trail, through Belize, and throughout the mountains surrounding Lake Yojoa, Honduras. These were service-related trips, but in between the serving, Wes found himself in some precarious situations, all in the name of great adventure. And he's here to share some of these stories with us today. I'm excited because this is really going to be some good campfire talk. Wes, welcome to the campfire.
Scott, man, let's strike a match. I'm glad to do this. This is going to be fun.
I'm so excited. Wes, can you just give us a quick little overview of who you are and just tell us about Wes Lawson here in Charlotte, North Carolina before we get started?
Sure. Yeah. So before I came to work at Jesse Brown's, before that, I was in education. I worked in higher education for 13, 14 years. While here, once with a little tech startup company teaching people to kind of change careers and write software. Before that, I was at Wake Forest Business School Uptown, which was really exciting to me because it was working professionals earning an MBA after hours. And I had earned my master's degree while I was working and commuting, and my son had just been born. So the thought of helping people learn something today to take to work tomorrow was really pretty great. But most of my time was at Hampden-Sydney College in Virginia, which is the 10th oldest college in the country. It's a men's college, which makes it a little bit different. It's also my alma mater, but I was the Associate Dean of Students there. If you or your son was in my office, he was either in trouble or he was in the leadership program. So I saw 2 different ends of the spectrum, which was pretty fun because sometimes you get somebody from the I'm in trouble side and help them get to the I'm a student leader side. So that was exciting. But you spend enough time working for your alma mater and you begin to realize it's time to get going and try new things. So we moved down here.
I get it. And I got to stop you for a second because I didn't know this part. I don't know if we talked about, you and I had a really great conversation, but you just said people come to your office either because they're in trouble or they're in a leadership program, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very confusing.
You know a little bit about both trouble and leadership.
And it's actually, that's how I got ultimately kind of involved because I oversaw a leadership program that I participated in as a college freshman, which kind of launched all of these adventures because we had this offsite retreat. And the 2 keynote speakers were our former president, Samuel Wilson, who's a retired 3-star general, Merrill's Marauder hero in World War II. His Wikipedia page is unreal. So we have that guy who's this great storyteller, leader of young men. And then a man who became a really important figure in my life, Ben Mathis, who at the time was running a group called Rivers of the World. And they would use rivers as a means to get to very remote places to help those people identify problems, to help them overcome them. He was running the only nonprofit in Congo during the Civil War. So it's Indiana Jones and like Eisenhower were our two speakers, basically.
Yeah.
And as an 18-year-old who didn't really get too excited about college, that was like, whoa, this is incredible. And at the end of the weekend, then Mathis says, wouldn't it be great if we went to Belize and built on a project I've got going on there? Who would be interested? And I didn't know any of these upperclassmen. There were 2 freshmen, me and another person, and then all these upperclassmen. And I was like, me. And I'm not a hand raiser. I was like, I'm going.
Yeah.
So I went to David Klein's office and was like, we got to make this happen. And bugged him about it for a year. And my sophomore year, we went with a group of about 8 or 10 people. I knew one of them, and half of that group are among my closest friends 20 plus years later. So it was a very formative experience for me. My college experience and probably part of my professional career wouldn't have happened because of that. So to me, it was a foundation for me. It was a touchstone kind of experience. And then I got to take over that program and build it more and take students to other countries and work on other projects and bring the vice chairman of the board of trustees along and say, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
This is unlike what other schools have going on, which was just a bunch of fun. So
it is. Wes, I want to stop you real quick because you know, I just saw in your face, some people are listening, some people are watching, but like that moment when you raised your hand, like there was something right there, right? So we're going to talk about that first trip and then how that turned into you leading these trips. But can you just tell me about that moment? Like, do you remember that moment when you raised your hand and what you were feeling and experiencing at that time?
Yeah. So, I mean, I had been in college for 2 weeks, 2 weeks at a men's college. So it's a little bit different. There's a certain level of posturing, but also like there is this sense of there is a commonality. Small school. I mean, I graduated with 220 people, schools 1,000 students or whatever. So small community. But I remember spending a weekend basically not talking to other students. At work, I am an extrovert, but I am by nature an introvert. And so if you and I were on a bus trip across the country, I'm going to lean on you to start that conversation because odds are I'm not going to be the one in my own time, especially as a student. I was still trying to figure out my place, and I felt like it's the upperclassmen's responsibility to bring me in. So all of a sudden there was this challenge issued of kind of like, I bet you guys won't do this. We should go, but I bet you don't have the courage to go to the jungle. And I was just like, yeah, I do. Because to me, it was like a challenge was issued and I kind of felt like Marty McFly in Back to the Future. Like, what'd you call me? Don't call me chicken. But also it was like I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I didn't really know what I wanted to study in college, but I knew that these 2 men had incredible stories and it all centered around service. And I liked that idea, like this idea of like, hey, we can go have an incredible time, but also help people. Like that's pretty awesome.
Both
so to me, it was just like my hand went up and then I was like, uh-oh, what did I just do? And then afterwards I was outside and here comes Ben Mathis walking up to his super cool Defender 90, Land Rover. And he's like, you think you guys will do it? And I was like, we'll see you in Belize next year. And we did. And I mean, he's been one of my most important mentors of the last 22 years, for thick and thin and some pretty sketchy situations. But I also learned through him and by him how to avoid a lot of that. So what it takes to kind of create these contacts overseas, how to work those relationships and how to not be a victim, which ultimately comes in pretty handy.
How to work relationships, how to not be a victim. Man, let's go there. Let's go on this trip. So you're going on a trip as a college student with Indiana Jones. Like let's go.
So we end up in Belize this first time. I knew where Belize was because I looked on a map. I had been to the Yucatan the year before on a service trip with my parents' church. But this was about 4.5, 5 hours south. So we end up in this little town called Orange Walk, which is in northern Belize. It's essentially a waypoint for farming. And we're staying at a little hotel on the new river called the St. Christopher Hotel. Across the street is this incredible Chinese restaurant called Sing Wong's. So Belize used to be part of the British Empire. So anybody in the empire can kind of move freely. So there is a Cantonese contingent in Belize. So we're sitting outside waiting to go in. And this little pickup truck slow rolls by. And Ben Mathis is a man with a presence. And he gets up and walks with his hand behind his back to that car and says something, and it speeds off. And he comes back and says, what just happened? He said, that guy had something in his hand and it looked suspicious to me. What did he have in his hand? He goes, it looked like a laser pointer. And laser pointers at night are usually attached to something else. I kind of read between the lines. And he said, I told him to get out of here or we'd have a problem. It was a real quick exchange. Off we went. So we go inside, have dinner, whatever. Walking across the street back to the hotel, you hear all the typical sounds of a Latin town. Cars backfiring, trucks without exhaust, dogs barking, chickens. Sounds and smells that actually over time I really like. It's just like it reminds you of a place. But there's also this really shrill, deep sound that makes you understand why people are inherently afraid of the dark. And they're howler monkeys. It's the loudest animal, I think, on Earth. And their voice echoes through their hollow jawbone, and it is shrill. And I, over the next 10 years, got pretty used to the sound. But I remember stopping in a street and going, oh, because we were staying in the hotel one night, and then we would be camping on Honey Camp Lagoon for the rest. So we go out there, get set up. I had camped out at that point once or twice in my life, a couple times, but not a lot. Since then, hundreds of times. But I'd never camped out on the edge of kind of a lagoon and a jungle. And so I had actually gone to Jesse Brown's. Bill Barty and Bill Turpin set me up. And I had this really big Petzl headlamp, yellow headlamp, two beams, battery pack in the back, like you're going to be a coal miner. Yeah. And I had gotten out of my tent to go use the bathroom. And there was two things you had to know. One is the outhouse, before you used it, you were supposed to kick the pipe so that the bats inside would fly out before you got in there. And I was like, you know what? That's a little too high maintenance for 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. I'm just going to walk over here. And I turned my headlamp on, and a bat came swooping in and hit it. Broke the thing. It's a Petzl climbing thing. Broke it. It's like, well, this is a problem. And it scared me to death. But then I realized, standing there in disbelief, that I could hear things. And it wasn't like I hear voices or anything, but you can hear this scurrying. So I picked up the headlamp, the low beam kind of worked, and you can hear the tarantulas walking. They're big enough that as the leaves and the grass bends, you hear it. And I thought, no one said there'd be tarantulas here. And I stood there kind of going, well, this is going to be a long week, because I don't really love spiders that are, they'd fit in your hand, right? Yeah. And you could see these little trails where the leafcutter ants go through. And so during the day, you'd see a leaf come by. It's just be millions of these things. But I stood there for a second going, I don't know if I'm going to go to sleep.
I'm thinking Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, when they're in the cave and there's like bugs all over the floor, and his girlfriend is freaking out because there's just like animals all over the place.
It got real. So I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. But we had a construction project to do. Yeah. So did our thing, worked hard during the day, putting a roof on a 2-story structure, no scaffolding, no ropes. It would be me, who had never done this, 2 stories up with my legs wrapped around a stringer, and 2 other people handing me these huge pieces of wood, and then somebody using a preacher's helper, which is a pole, pushing it up. And I'd swing the other end up to David Klein, our Adidas students, and I learned how to roof from him. And I realized pretty quickly, it's like, I used to not think I would like heights. I'm not afraid of heights. I don't think I ever was, but I was never comfortable up there.
Yeah.
But that was kind of like thing one, like boom, bat didn't get me. Tarantulas didn't carry me away. I can do this. And I liked the physicality of what we were doing.
Yeah.
But I was really caught off guard one night. We're sitting around our campfire, relaxing, telling stories and dirty jokes. And a man comes walking through the grass who we knew was Pedro, who lived down the way around Honeycamp Lagoon. And he had a blue plastic bag like you might get at Walmart. And he's speaking Garifuna or Garifuna, which is kind of their Creole sort of pidgin English. Really hard to understand until you just don't think about it. You follow the rhythms and everything. The blue plastic bag, which was just a blue plastic bag, he said would keep the contents cold because it was blue. This is dubious science. Inside of it was a 2-day deceased armadillo he had killed, and he brought it over to us to share. He was going to cook it. I don't know much about cooking armadillo, but I know that food that's been kept in a plastic bag in Central America for 2 days probably is something I'm not going to eat.
Yeah.
But he threw it down on the fire and just started cooking it. Burnt tires smell better. I will tell you that. That remains one of the only meals in Central America, Mexico, Spain, anywhere I've lived that I've turned down, because the plastic bags don't keep your food cold.
There is a line. There is a line.
There is, and that one I knew I would not cross. I ate everything else, right? So Belize has a national dish. It's a little creature called a gibnut, which is also called a wahote or a watusa. It's a paca, which is the 4th or 5th largest rodent in the world. The second largest being a beaver, right? And beavers can get enormous. This looks like the cross between like a beaver head, so it's got this squared out face, spots like a fawn, but then it kind of looks like a jackrabbit. Like its front 4 legs are shorter. Kind of has like an emphysema kind of wheeze. They're kind of cute, and they taste like store brand stewed meat.
I'm getting a jackalope vibe here.
Kind of. It's called the royal rodent down there because in the 60s or 70s, when Queen Elizabeth visited, she was served it. So it came up for dinner one night, and somebody's like, "I bet you won't eat that." I was like, "I bet I will. I'm hungry, and as long as I have something to wash it down with, let's go."
Not eating the armadillo, but I'm gonna try this rodent. Yeah.
So the armadillo,
Yeah.
had not been refrigerated, and it wasn't like it was cold down there. So armadillo remains the meal. I think that I was like, I cannot do this. I ate plenty of public school lunches in Maryland, and plenty of odd things on football and lacrosse trips when I lived in Virginia, where it's like, I think that fillet of fish has been out for a long time.
That's right.
But that armadillo is like, that was a hard line to cross. Now, maybe if it had been prepared properly, I might try it. Because I've had iguana and iguana eggs, and it's really good. But it was
the culinary adventure was intense down there. So what happened on this first trip that led you to the next phase, which is now leading these kinds of trips?
So that was my sophomore year. We did a trip again my junior year, and then my senior year, things kind of got a little bit wonky, and David Klein could not lead the trip. So a recent graduate or two and I kind of served as leaders. So I had keys to the van. Ben Mathis was there. We were in a different location, but I was a 21 or 22-year-old college senior driving a van around northern Belize with a bunch of other people because I had been there enough. I made airport runs. I mean, supply runs alone, which is insane and something I don't recommend. Take somebody else with you. But like I might be gone for half the day getting supplies, hauling in, concrete and stuff. And so by the time I started working for the college, it was kind of expected. Like I expected to go. And we started doing 2 trips a year. And the opportunity to go to Honduras came up. And I thought, that'd be interesting. I remember hearing about Hurricane Mitch in the 90s. I liked to travel. I studied Spanish in college. I was a Spanish and political science major. Nice. So I was like, hey, Banana Republic, nice. Maybe they need a new president. I can do this. And we got down there, and our project manager, our fixer, is a man named Israel Gonzalez. And he is one of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. An engineer by trade. He's a pastor. His wife is a physician. And he knows everybody. And he's super positive. And he meets us at the airport in Honduras, in San Pedro Sula. And immediately I knew, I was like, this guy is the real deal. We had a plan to go into the mountains around Lake Yojoa, which is right in the middle of Honduras. Okay. And it actually gets kind of cool in the mountains, but you know, the Pan American Highway goes right through. We're going to be building a clinic that is designed to bring people from the mountains here to get treatment. And I thought, this is going to be amazing. And we're on the highway heading to the inn where we were staying on Lake Yojoa, up and down these mountains. And, you know, road conditions are suspicious at best. And I'm driving a Toyota van that, depending on where you're from, is either a High Ace or a Hayase. 14 people in it, all of our gear on wheels the size of what you have on a go-kart, doing 130 kilometers an hour, following Israel in his F-350 dually, loaded down. And we were just flying. But, you know, cars zipping, you got vans and buses coming and horse-drawn buggies. And it's kind of like, this is nuts. And it was a manual, so I'm just like flying through this.
You're driving.
I'm driving.
Yeah.
My boss is riding shotgun and I'm driving and breaking a sweat the whole time thinking, this is nuts. But like, if I don't catch up with that guy, I don't know where we're going. So there's this real thing of like, we got to get there. We don't have a map. Blackberries didn't do anything down there. Like, this is pre-iPhone. And all of a sudden, almost past his truck, it's broken down. So I lock up the brakes and tell everybody, you know, bail out in case we get hit. Get out, stand over there. And Israel and I start troubleshooting this thing. And I have a picture somewhere of me on the roof of his F-350 with a satellite phone with that antenna pushed up, trying to call a friend who may know what in the world is wrong. And as I'm doing that, this little SUV pulls up and a man who looks just like Mr. Clean gets out. He goes, you don't want to be here right now. And I kind of looked around and said, who is he talking to? He goes, you don't want to be here right now. I said, yeah, I know. Truck's broke down. He goes, you need to move it. It's like, we can't. It's broken down and it's big. Like, we can't push it up a mountain. So I jump down and start talking to him, and he goes, who's that? Points to Israel. I said, his name's Israel Gonzalez. He's with Christian community in Honduras. And the guy turns and walks away. He's like, well, this is really rude. He's got on like a safari vest, shiny head. He's big. And he comes back and he goes, your guy checks out. And I said, I know he does. I know he checks out, but who are you? Like, I was getting really angry. Yeah. And, you know, I'm not really big and I'm not shiny bald head. Like, I don't have that presence. Yeah. And he pulls his vest back and I see a badge. I'm like, okay. And a Colt 1911. I was like, who are you? And he introduced himself as a chief warrant officer with the Army. And he was responsible for all of the Army criminal investigations in Latin America. Mm. So it's like the Army's version of NCIS. Yeah. And I said, well, what are you doing here? He goes, well, the only U.S. base in Central South America is in Honduras, and we're on our way back there. Let us help you. Load all your stuff in here, put your people in your van. We're going to tow him to the lodge. Wow. So we did. And I was like, we get there. Thank you guys so much. I apologize for being kind of abrupt with you. We're unloading bags, and I get to the last one and unload this like gym bag I didn't recognize. And the little sergeant major who had been driving put his hand on mine very firmly and said, that's mine, it stays. So I don't mean to cross the line, but this feels a lot like a Mossberg 500 pump. And he said, that is. I said, why do you have a 12-gauge shotgun in a gym bag? He said, because we can't carry rifles, and that has to be hidden. It can't be in plain sight. Like, got it. So we found out that they are there to assist in, counter narcotics trafficking operations, training the local police and military, and they had a person with them, a State Department person who kind of needed protection, who also joined us, but was really dodgy about questions. But they said, "Hey, come tour Task Force Bravo. It's really neat. If you could see this, it's a huge military complex in Honduras. It's where the Honduran Air Force Academy is." And we would see helicopters flying over, U.S. helicopters doing like counter narcotics operations. But what came of that was this Mr. Clean fellow handed me a card. He said, "That number on there is for the Tactical Operations Center. And if you're an American at risk of losing life, limb, or eyesight, and you're in this vicinity, you call that number, you tell them where you are. Somebody's going to come for you." And it was at that moment I realized we've been doing these trips for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And we were not prepared for contingencies. We weren't prepared for a vehicle to break down. We weren't prepared to have somebody stop us, basically. Didn't know that there was this military base there. Didn't know there was such a thing as a Tactical Operations Command Center to call. And it changed my view of how to prepare for trips completely. Because when you're on the side of the highway with a satellite phone, which you have been convinced is like going to work no matter what, and you can't connect to anybody, and this vehicle is not moving, and you have 12 or 14 people who you're responsible for on the side of a very busy transcontinental highway, it gets a little bit dicey, a little bit fast. And that's when I started thinking, man, what have we gotten ourselves into? And how do we get out of it? Like, how do we get out of this problem?
Yeah, you're in a pretty intense, like dangerous situation, and like not even totally realizing it. And it's just interesting because, again, like listening to your story, it seems like there was a moment of almost awakening where it was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize what I had gotten myself into. And then like once you wake up and realize like where you are and what you're surrounded by, like you can't go backwards to that sort of place of ignorance, I'll say.
Yeah, you once you see it, once you experience it, you can't. And so, where it really hit me again was that same trip. We're up in the mountains, and the truck I was driving is a Kia that we don't get in the U.S. It's called K1500. It's a cab over pickup truck, so it looks like a fire truck almost, but on little wheels. It's a little diesel. And I put all my guys in the back and a cement mixer, and we're going up the mountains because we're going to put concrete floor down in a home to reduce respiratory distress.
Okay.
If we can do that, we can knock out 80% of these breathing problems. But the problem is those mountains get a lot of rain, and it's not a road, it's a trail. So you have to time, when you're following a vehicle, you have to time the driving the right way that vehicle can make the turn and accelerate without you getting behind, because if somebody pops the clutch or they have to make a 3-point turn, somebody's going over the mountain.
Yeah.
And the fog was so thick that for a long time, I didn't realize that was the edge of the mountain. We had made a turn, and I looked down, and it was a solid like 900 feet just down. And I thought, man, I'm responsible for these 18 to 22-year-olds, and their parents want to see them, and I want to get home to see Amy. Like, this is kind of scary.
Yeah.
But going up is fine. Going down is absolutely terrifying because it's muddy, and steering changes in the mud, and when you're overloaded, it changes dynamics of a turn. It pushes you out of the turn, and you can't ride the brakes. And what I didn't realize was the brakes were awful in this thing. So I would try to downshift, but then people and a cement mixer would move forward, and so we would have to go down the mountain with the bumper of this thing pressed against the larger F-350 and ride down like that. And some guys thought it was funny, but what I found out was they were singing and laughing. So at dinner that night, it's like, so I don't know about y'all, but I was terrified, because I was terrified that you would get hurt, that you would fall out and I would run over you. And what do we do? Like I could never go on. And one of the guys said, Dean Lawson, we were singing and laughing because we were so scared. We didn't know what else to do. So it's a
Wow.
big bunch of rough and tough guys
Yeah.
telling filthy jokes and singing songs, because the reality is they thought something bad was going to happen too. And one of them said, we just figured that you and Dean Klein and Israel kind of knew what you were doing. And so we were going to focus on that. And it's like, I appreciate the vote of confidence. But
Yeah. So they're just distracting their minds. I mean, they're afraid and they're just distracting their minds. Yeah.
and we just kind of came together and like, all right, well, we're going to make this thing work. So if you trust me and I trust you, great. Next trip's going to be better prepared.
Yeah.
And so, we would work towards some of that. But what we also experienced that I wasn't quite really ready for was some of, I don't like stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
And I get kind of defensive about some of it. Like I get really touchy about how people refer to our friends from Central America. And so I was kind of in that mindset of like, man, we're not going to get stopped at a checkpoint. That's ridiculous. And we did, like, every day. And so I'd be sitting there with a young man with a AK-47 resting on the windowsill, quizzing me on who these people are and where we're going. And it's this thought of, do I speak Spanish with him and try to get out of this? Do I play dumb and see if he just lets us go? So there's two ways I would do this. Is I up front would have in the center console a Coca-Cola and a carton, just a single 20 pack of American cigarettes. And I'd say, would you like one of these? And that would work. And then after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm kind of tired of this. And so it happened again. And that man asked where we're going. I said, we're helping to build the clinic down here near Tala Bay. We have a dentist. Bring your family tomorrow and let our dentist take care of your children. And he kind of looked at me quizzically and he said, why? I said, our dentist wants to help. And if your children have healthy teeth, they're going to smile more. And I was like, I hope this works, because that gun is really close to me.
Yeah.
And he said, what time tomorrow? It's 8 o'clock. We got there at 8 o'clock the next morning, and most of my guys were ready to do concrete work, but a few were ready to peel off with our dentist, Aaron Marks. And the line was long. I mean, dozens of people had heard now. And we didn't get stopped again on that trip, because I'd pull up to that checkpoint and he'd just wave.
Now you got a reputation.
Because everybody, including he, had some dental work done. But it was also kind of like, well, what if something goes wrong at a checkpoint? Like, what if that gun doesn't have a safety? What if somebody in the back mouths off? What if, a narco trafficker drives by? Like, it's still a real situation of, I don't belong here, and it wouldn't be very hard to disappear.
Yeah.
So, that would be something I'd think about a lot.
Yeah, Wes, this is like, there's so much to unravel in all this. Like, there's an element of service on these trips that you take, but then there's also like really like high danger. Like, I mean, there's a lot of fear that's baked into this. Like, what motivates you? Like, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could help people, right? You don't have to go deep into the jungle in Honduras. Like, why do you choose to do this?
So you're right. There's 1,000 different ways you can help people close to home, far away. We looked at this as, what's a really unique experience that only we can offer, or very few can offer. But also, how do we, like, think about it from a leadership standpoint? How do we develop future leaders? Different philosophies come in, like a crucible experience where everybody goes through this challenge, like Navy SEALs or Marines. There it is. What I liked was, this is going to be a cross section of students from campus who may not know each other. Just like on my first trip, I knew one, not the other 11. So we force these relationships because, hey, we're going to be in Honduras for a long time.
Yeah.
But also, when we pull people from their comfort zone and their support network, they get to see who they really are. Their values are tested. So, as if going to college isn't enough of that. But now at work, when we're doing these physical things, you start to get to know somebody, but it feels good to work hard, right? And it feels good at the end to say, man, I did that. I learned how to do this. I did that. But at night, we'd sit around and have conversations that I know did not take place typically in a fraternity house or in the dining hall, about faith or values or a problem they had on campus, or a professor, or even my office. Like, do you have a problem with this policy? Let's talk about it. Let's get down into this. But it pulled them away from the distractions of their built-in friend groups and support groups. And now they really got challenged on, well, what do you think about immigration? What do you think about the role of women in society, or the need for access to great health care? You know, this is still like pre-Obamacare kind of stuff. So it was, you know, when you put people that far out of their comfort zone, they begin to take other chances, other risks at saying, you know, maybe I don't believe what I've been saying. Maybe I don't actually want to vote that way. Or maybe you're not such a bad person. Maybe I'm not so good. Like, maybe I do smell funny. But then when they would get back to campus, it would mean like that group wouldn't have such animosity towards another, because one of their leaders would say, man, I know some of those guys.
Yeah.
They're good. They're good. We did that, and the service side and the adventure side was the vehicle.
Yeah.
And that hit some people the wrong way, because they want it to be the service part first. I totally get that. But that model's already out there. We wanted a different model, and I'm not saying ours is any better than anybody else's. Far from it. Our goal, though, was to use adventure to lure people in, service to lure them in, to develop more complexly as an ethical leader and as a good human being.
Yeah. I mean, like it did for you, like all those years ago when you raised your hand and said, I'm going.
Yeah.
And I think
I mean, it changed my life.
And so you're talking about like basically pulling people out of their comfortable environments and putting them in these kind of extreme adventure situations and watching what unfolds. Like basically by doing that, you're opening up their own awareness and kind of expanding them into these great conversations. But one thing I love, again, like you said, as the dean of students, like the assistant, they would come in, and they would either come in because they were in trouble or because of a leadership program. And what I'm hearing you say is like, you've combined both of these things. It's like trouble breeds leadership.
Yeah. So, you know, I think back to that first leadership retreat. So the leadership program was called the Society of 1791, the first graduating class of Hampden-Sydney College, which had 8 members who went on to help change the face of the nation. But when General Wilson would talk about being in Merrill's Marauders in China, Burma, and India in 1943 and 44, he, as a 20-year-old lieutenant, he was the youngest lieutenant leading an intelligence platoon in the U.S. Army, recruited most of his reconnaissance scouts from the stockade, from jail, because they're risk takers. They eschew rules. They don't like conventional leadership. I am habitually a rule follower. Like I just am.
Yeah.
But a lot of these young men who were getting into disciplinary problems wasn't because they're bad. They just didn't know how to deal with the challenges of leaving the nest, of the emotions of finding themselves, getting out of that comfort zone, peer pressure. So very few of them was like, you know what, you're a bad person. It was more of talk about what happened. They needed a purpose. They needed a cause. And if you give them that opportunity, they'll take that energy from destruction to tremendous creation. And if I can get somebody to, instead of leading a bunch of, vigilantes and ne'er-do-wells, to leading a group of innovators, simply by saying, I see you and I believe in you.
Yeah. That's
so easy. So come on this trip, and it's going to change how you see things. It's going to change how you view the world, how you view yourself. It's really important.
Yeah. And I want to, like, if we can talk about the fear element of this, because I think that, the service piece is really important, but I think part of what you've done here is you've created these environments. Like fear is a real thing in some of these situations that you've been in. And I just wonder if you could kind of talk about like the impact that fear has had on you and on the people that have come on your trips, and just kind of elaborate on that a little bit.
So fear is very real and is I think, ever present. Fear is why people don't do a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't go to certain places because they're dangerous. If you think a country's dangerous, read other countries' travel advisories to the United States. You will not want to travel to the United States. And I tell folks that all the time when we outfitted Jesse Brown's, let me pull data for you to tell you this stuff. But, I've been to Central America. I studied abroad in Spain. I've been to Italy, been on all these places, worked in a dude ranch. I never got hurt in Central America. I got sick one time, like a whole group got sick, and it was so bad we had to burn the tents, set everything on fire, and left. But you can get over that. Like, you can eat bananas and drink some water, and you'll be okay. But I got concussions playing football and lacrosse. I tore a knee to pieces playing lacrosse. Knocked out all my teeth riding a skateboard as a kid. Can't ride skateboards for anything. But never had a truly negative experience in Central America. I'd say, you know what, we should not take people here. I can plan contingencies around if things go wrong, how to avoid problems. But I was a white collar suit and tie guy up until 2017. I worked for Wake Forest Business School, uptown Charlotte, which is in a Bank of America building. Yeah. Mid-morning, one day, went back to my truck to get earbuds because I had a call coming up mid-morning, and get jumped in the parking lot. And in the course of 15 or 20 seconds, I'm in a knockdown drag out with two people I've never seen before in my life, and get stabbed 4 times. And, people will say, uptown's safe. Maybe it is. But for me, it's a place that I hold differently. Parking garages, to me, are scarier than Central America. Because I've never been hurt down there. Those people never caused problems. So, and it's interesting because it took me a long time, it took me years to really accept that and to really embrace that fear. There's for me, there's 2 fears. One is, hey, this activity looks kind of scary. Like when Bill and I rappelled off of a roof. But I've been skydiving, so I can do that. Yeah. Fears that I want to conquer. And then there are those fears like things that go bump in the night, or the fears that live psychologically very deep in our brains. Those are much more challenging to conquer, but they both are related. And how do we beat them? With people who know how. Like, if you want to travel to this place, let me help you. We'll develop a plan so you can have a great time. And if things go weird, you'll be okay. Just like working with professionals about, I have this thing going on and it's causing these problems. Here's how you deal with that. So I went from being a vigilant person on these trips, knowing how to navigate things, knowing that my first aid kit, I was an EMT and a wilderness EMT for those trips. Like, I had all this extra training. So if you got hurt, I can fix you. So I went from being vigilant to, for years, not realizing that I was being what people in healthcare call hypervigilant. Yeah. So aware of what's around me that, you're always just about to have an anxiety attack or a panic attack. And it changes your life because you don't do certain things, because that may be scary. That may be bad. I may not like that. I may not know how to get out. And over time have helped, kind of learn how to work against that and how to let that voice get a little bit quieter. Because it is hard to turn off vigilance and hypervigilance. But I tell people who want to hear it, there are places in the world you probably shouldn't go. Like, Scott, you and I don't need to go to a war zone. We're not combat journalists. We're not soldiers. We don't need to go there. I don't need to go to Antarctica. I'm from the South. I'll freeze. It's just too cold. It'd be neat to see if we could take a heater with us. But as far as saying like broad brush strokes, you shouldn't go to that neighborhood. You shouldn't go to that country. Like, Central America is not safe. I felt safer in Central America than in large portions of America.
Yeah. And what I heard you say was really, before it's sort of this awakening, like where you realize I'm in this, but like once you kind of became aware, like, hey, there might be some danger here, like you
Yeah.
started plugging into preparation and
Yep.
like you said, that hypervigilance. Like, I'm curious, in your experience in Uptown Charlotte in that parking garage, were you hypervigilant at that point?
No, I would tell you that I was vigilant. Like I typically would know um, where cars were, people, things like that. So it was extremely shocking to me that
Yeah.
two people suddenly materialized between my truck and the Audi SUV parked next to me, because parking garages in Uptown Charlotte are tight spaces.
Yeah.
So the door of my truck opened enough that I could slide in sideways to get these earbuds out of the center console. So
Right.
for a person to fit in that space with me and me not know it initially was extremely surprising to me.
Yeah.
As was the duration of time. Like 10, 15, 20 seconds isn't that long, except when you're in a space about the width of two people's chests who are trying very hard to outlast the other person. And getting into a scuffle with somebody in dress shoes is a challenge. Doing it half of your body in a car is a challenge. Doing it when they're armed and you're not is a challenge. And then living life after that can be a challenge. Experiencing joy after that can be a real challenge, because that changes how your body reacts to surprise,
Right.
to smells, right? Like
Right.
I can smell that person still.
Yeah.
Sense memories are insane. So I love that smell of what Central America kind of has, and those sounds. But then parking garage sounds, I'm out.
Well,
Not in a happy place.
it seems like you can go to Central America and be in this place that has all of these perceived dangers that a lot of
Yeah,
our listeners might be listening like, I'm not going there. That sounds crazy. I don't want to get stopped by like military personnel holding
sure.
AK-47. Like, that's scary. I don't want to do that. But you were prepared and you were vigilant and you're like aware of what's going on and kind of prepared on how to handle it. Whereas like, sometimes here in Charlotte, North Carolina, or anywhere in the United States, we're just living our normal lives and we're getting in and out of cars. Like, we kind of lose sight of that and we lose that
Yeah.
vigilance, and and then all of a sudden, smack, we get hit with something completely unexpected.
If you look at the list from any reputable healthcare group, CDC, anybody, top 10 causes of death, none of them were travel.
Yeah.
They're all cardiovascular, diabetes, cancer. 2021, 1,700 people were killed in North Carolina in motor vehicle collisions, which with our population is about 1 in 500, 1 in 600 people. None of these are travel related. Well, I mean, the car part might be, but there's no travel has risk. It's most likely going to be TD, traveler's diarrhea. So take some Imodium, take some Pepto, know which one to take and when, drink bottled water. But don't not see the world. Don't not meet new people. I mean, you think like Europe has its risks too. People love Europe. Central America is incredible if you give it a chance. So is America, right? Like, I'm not against America at any step of the way, because there are places here people won't go. Like, I don't know about that. Like, try it.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is, I mean, fear ultimately is a tool, because like when you feel that fear and you can use it to your advantage, like you can use that fear to become aware and to become vigilant. And
Yeah.
I think part of the problem is with getting in and out of our car every day is like, we do it so much that we don't feel that fear. And so like we kind of lose sight of that vigilance, and here we are driving down the road, looking at our phone, texting and doing all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, wham. And if that fear was there, perhaps some of that stuff wouldn't happen.
When I went through EMT training and then through the emergency vehicle operators course training to drive ambulances and fire trucks and first responder vehicles, they kept beating us over the head with, the minute you turn on the lights and sirens, there's a 50% increase in the likelihood of you being involved in a collision, either because of a distracted driver or because you're going to go too fast and you're going to think everybody's going to move for you. So you have to balance that. So it's like, here's all this extra training. You have lights, you have sirens, but also human element can still mess things up. Fear to me is like an emotional spice, and you need a little bit of it, but too much of it ruins the dish.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you don't have that, there really isn't a balance. You really can't have good without bad. You just have a thing. Plenty of these fears in life, like learning to ride a bike or swimming or driving or travel, as you conquer it, you feel your posture change. You go, man, I should do more of this. And it's like, I like this. I can go to the mountains. I can go fishing. I can do these things. And it becomes one more ever expanding set of skills or experiences. You go, I really had a great time doing that. So without a little bit of that fear, you're just kind of traveling. You're just doing something, which is totally fine. Yeah. But that little bit also keeps you honest about, I should probably pack Band-Aids.
Preparation. It's great wisdom as we sort of wrap up here, Wes. I think what I'd like to finish with is just your advice on this idea of fear. Like, if there are people, this whole podcast is about encouraging people to listen to the voice inside that calls us to adventure. And I think a lot of times it's fear that stops us from listening to that voice and doing some of these things that we really want to pursue. So what would your advice be for people that are letting fear get in the way, and how to overcome it?
So there's usually two voices. One saying we should go do this thing. That looks like fun. And then there's the other voice, which is like, that looks like it's going to hurt, or that's going to be expensive, or I'm not there yet. So, balance those. If you're not there yet, why? If it's too expensive, okay, you can save up. If you really want to go, set aside a little bit, keep it within the budget. Or don't stay in such a nice hotel, right? Like, you can make this thing work, do it differently. If it's because of a fear of injury, well, work with the right people, right? So when I went skydiving, I didn't do it on my own. I went with a skydiving outfit who knows what to do. And that changed everything. It's like, now I trust you.
Yes.
And we've checked our gear 10 times. Looks good to me, looks good to you. Let's do this. Just like, when I was playing sports, we didn't just, like, on the first day, play a game. You train and you build up to it. Just like we study for tests. So what's holding us back? And then let's confront it and say, like, give it a name, write down about it, think about it, talk to somebody else. And I would say, we do this a lot at Jesse Brown's, is let's get you ready so your experiences are positive and your expectations are exceeded. And if you really don't want to go, don't. You don't have to do it, but maybe you'll really actually want to go, and you go, this was awesome. I really liked fly fishing, or I really liked camping for the first time, or you know what? Italy was great, but Croatia was amazing. And we never even thought about it because it's not in the guidebook. Like, talk to folks who you trust and say, how could we do this and it not be awful? All right, we can do that.
And I bet if you're in Charlotte, North Carolina, and you're feeling some fear, but you want to go on a trip, you can probably come in to Jesse Brown's and talk to Wes or Bill Barty and get some encouragement.
Yeah. Well, and I, like, when I get people ready for these international trips, I give you all this information, and part of it is the scary stuff, like the crime stuff. Park that. Here's the list of numbers. If something does go wrong, here's some hospitals. Park that too. Now get rid of the worry.
Yeah.
Go have your experience. Have a great time. Eat the food. Drink the bottled water. Do these fun things. But also, if things do go wrong, now you know how to combat that situation. And pack Band-Aids and pack, ibuprofen and Imodium and that kind of stuff, and you'll be fine. Like, it's going to be okay. We can get through this.
Y'all at Jesse Brown's can get people ready. So, Wes, two final questions just to kind of wrap things up here, because you have some unbelievable stories on the Appalachian Trail in Belize and Honduras. Like, at some point, Wes, Hollywood's going to pick up on you in your life, and they're going to want to make a movie about you. And I want to know, when they do, who's going to be the actor that's going to play you in your movie?
I thought long and hard about this. I think it's going to be Denzel.
Nice.
I think, that's Jason Sudeikis, probably, because people they're like, you kind of look like him.
Yeah,
if I
totally see that.
Kind of get some Ted Lasso.
You could totally do Ted Lasso. I'm seeing it right now.
So I guess I need to polish up and watch a few episodes. So I think Denzel is out. He'd do a good job, but I think
he would do a good job. But I definitely see the Jason Sudeikis resemblance. So that's good. What's your movie going to be called?
So I think this would be a tip of the cap to Ben Mathis, who always started his stories with "So there we were." I think it's "So there we were."
Yeah. So there we were, starring Jason Sudeikis. I love it. That's going to be a killer movie. I can't wait to watch it. So he's kind of a funny guy. Is there going to be some humor in this movie?
We didn't cover any of the funny stories. Like, we didn't cover anything that was
You
funny.
did another podcast episode for that.
I would tell you that most of these experiences, most of those trips were, at times choking with laughter. Just absolutely hilarious. The guys in the back of that bus or the van who were singing and telling jokes going down the mountain were dying with laughter because they thought they were going to die. But yeah, there were some things that happened that was like, some of our spouses probably don't even know about it because they would be like, I married a moron.
I love it. Well, we might have to do part 2. Today was the scary stuff and the fear. And next time will be the funny jokes. But I really appreciate you spending the time with me today. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope that Wes's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. And when you do, go see Wes at Jesse Brown's and he'll get you all the gear that you need. Thank you so much for listening. Wes, thank you so much for being here today. This was awesome.
Scott, thank you for having me on and for all that you do, getting people to get out of their comfort zone. It's just incredible.